for choosing to watch our presentation video on the Infraorder Pecora. My name is Julie, and you will also be hearing from my colleagues Richie and Kaylee. As you watch this video, our hope is that you take away not only basic information about Pecoran species, but also specific scientific information that will help change the way you view these species. Thank you again and enjoy. Pecora is an infraorder found within the order Artiodactyla, which are the even-toed ungulates. The even-toed ungulates are ungulates, or hoofed animals, which bear weight equally on 2 of their 5 toes, the 3rd and 4th toe, as we can see in these 2 images here. The other 3 toes are either present, absent, vestigial, or pointing posteriorly. By contrast, odd-toed ungulates, as seen in this image, bear weight on an odd number of the 5 toes. Pecora is found within Ruminatia, or the ruminants. Ruminants are mammals with specialized digestive systems that use fermentation processes to gain nutrients from plant material. Cattle, sheep, horses, deer, goats, and the infraorder Traguina are all ruminants. Traguina is an infraorder within the larger suborder Ruminatia, which is the sister clade to the infraorder Pecora. Traguina contains one extant or living family, as well as several extinct families. The topic of our presentation, Pecora, contains Antilocapridae, which are the pronghorns, Giraffidae, which are the giraffes, Cervidae, which are the deer, Bovidae, which are your cattle, and finally, Moschidae, which are your musk deer and other extinct relatives. Pecorans share characteristics with other artiodactyls, including a 4-chambered stomach and a parazonic foot, meaning that it supports weight on the 3rd and 4th digits. Several characteristics distinguish Pecora from its sister taxon, Traguina: an astragalus with parallel sides, and a loss of the trapezium, with indifferences in parts of the skull, such as the petrosal bone. The distinguishing features of most Pecoran families are cranial appendages. Most modern Pecorans, with the exception of the Moschidae family, which we will only briefly talk about at the end of our presentation, have one of 4 types of cranial appendages: horns, antlers, ossicones, or pronghorns. True horns have a bone core that is covered in a permanent sheath of keratin. They are indicative of Bovidae. Horns develop in the periosteum over the frontal bone and can be curved or straight. Surface features on the keratin sheath, like ridges or twists, are thought to be caused by differential rates of growth around the bone core. Antlers are bony structures that are shed and replaced each year in members of the family Cervidae. They grow from a permanent outgrowth of the frontal bone called a pedicle. Antlers can be branched, as in the white-tailed deer, or palmate, as in the moose. Ossicones are permanent bone structures that fuse to the frontal or parietal bones during the lifetime of an animal. They are found only in the Giraffidae family and are closely related extinct clades, the representative modern-day animals by the giraffe and the okapi. Pronghorns are similar to horns in that they have keratinous sheaths covering permanent bone cores. However, these sheaths are deciduous and can be shed like antlers. Very little is known about the development of these pronghorns, but they are generally presumed to have evolved independently, and the only extant animal with pronghorns is the pronghorn antelope. In the next slide, we will hear from an expert in the field, Rebecca Woolley, who is a current zookeeper at the Lincoln Park Zoo, on what makes an ossicone unique. She has spent many years working with and aiding research in giraffes across the United States throughout her career. But to hop into more of like a detailed question, so many people know that giraffes kind of have like 2 horns on the top of the head, but from what we know, according to our research so far, that they aren't true horns. Can you explain a bit about maybe like the reasoning behind this and what purpose these horns might serve for them?
So they're actually called ossicones, is like the like official term, and I've never heard of anything other than a giraffe having ossicones, so it may be giraffe specific, but there could also be animals I don't know about, so take that with a grain of salt. Which similar to horns, they're just bony calcification, like horn, for a lack of a better word. They are still fused to the skull, so if you see a skull of a giraffe, it'll have them. The males also get extra ones. Like if you've ever seen like a full-grown male giraffe and they have those bumps like all over their face, that's a good way to tell the male from the female, especially once they get older. As far as everything I've seen and people have come out with, the ossicones somehow help with temperature regulation. I don't fully know how, but that's what they do. And then the males have the extra bumps because they fight, so it protects their face when they're bashing each other with their heads. So I'm sure you guys have seen the videos of giraffes whacking each other. But yeah, they're really weird. Giraffes are weird, which is why they're cool. So I don't know that they know. I don't 100% know exactly like the mechanisms, but it's supposed to help with temperature regulation.
Mitochondrial DNA has been very useful in various phylogenetics
complex phylogenetic and phylogeographic mitochondrial DNA patterns is the genus Cervus, which underwent a successful radiation together with other ruminants. The evolutionary radiation of capillines took place during the late Miocene in the middle latitudes of Eurasia, but their diversity was significantly depleted by their subsequent climate changes. Another research article stated that this subfamily gave a rich late Miocene evolutionary radiation in western Eurasia. Many similarities in morphology, the taxonomic classification within the Cervidae difficult, especially within the highly classic genus. Cervidae are united by a series of synapomorphies, including the possession of mammon. Caprioli are defined by their parallel and slope backwards long pedicles, paleomeric fold in lower molars, protoconal fold in upper molars, and the high position of the first antler ramification. Antlers are deciduous, osseous branch outgrowths of the frontal bone. They are unique cranial appendages, which are shed and rebuilt at intervals. This process is controlled by a complex interaction of fluctuating levels of several hormones, most importantly testosterone. Deer are strongly distinguished from antelopes by their antlers, which are temporary and regularly grown, unlike the permanent horns of bovines. They are the only mammalian appendages capable of repeated rounds of regeneration. Every year they are shed and regrow from elastina into large branched structures of cartilage and bone that are used for fighting, sexual selection, and display. Unlike the New World deer, the antlers in Cervidae begin growing immediately after the last pair is shed. The image here shows the evolution of the antlers of Cervidae. The silhouettes are the lateral view of the left antlers. The fixed topology of the molecular phylogenetic tree used for reconstruction is from the 2020 study, The Systematics of Cervidae, a total evidence. Are then a few Cervidae species of moonjack and the reindeer. There are 12 known species of moonjack deer, and the most common species is the Indian moonjack. It's among the smallest of deer species native to South and Southeast Asia. The Indian moonjack is a diploid chromosome number of 7 in the male and 6 in the female, the lowest number yet described in a mammal. Its near relative is Riggs moonjack. It has a diploid number of 46, and the karyotypes of the two species are very different. Its call sounds like a barking, often when frightened by a predator, hence their common name barking deer. If the barking doesn't work, the moonjack can defend themselves using their antlers, but their tusk-like canine teeth are also an option. They may also even use these fangs on each other if they find themselves in a territorial scuffle. Short, curled antlers that are carried on their foreheads by bony pedicles are stalk-like structures that extend down their face to form a pair of dark ridges. Seen in the picture, caribou are what the species are called in North America, and reindeer are what they're called in Eurasia. Some deer have circumpolar distribution in both North America and Eurasia. Examples include the caribou that live in our Arctic tundra in Taiga, and moose that inhabit Taiga and adjacent areas. Caribou are recognizable by their coat that varies in color from off-white to dark brown, depending on the population group and the season. A study in 2018 found that lichens constituted about 71% of the late winter diets of caribou in northwest Alaska, whereas moss and shrubs were the next most common forage items. Caribou that migrated south had lower levels of nutritional stress, higher levels of lichen in the diet, and lower levels of moss and shrubs compared to the caribou that did not migrate south. The reindeer is the only successful semi-domesticated deer on a large scale in the world, and according to folklore, Santa Claus's sleigh is pulled by a flying reindeer, and the Easter reindeer were first named in the 1823 poem A Visit from St. Nicholas.
Now we're going to jump into the pronghorn, which is also known as Antilocapridae. Antilo means antelope, and capro means male goat. There's currently one extant species of pronghorn, which is Antilocapra americana. This species is endemic to North America, and there are 5 subspecies of pronghorn. And that's the common pronghorn, the Mexican pronghorn, the Baja California pronghorn, the Sonoran pronghorn, and the Oregon pronghorn. In the next slide, we're going to dive in a little bit to see the differences between these 5 extant subspecies. These 5 subspecies were named because of minor differences in color, size, and location. The common pronghorn is a subspecies that habitats the United States and Canada. Meanwhile, the Oregon pronghorn recently showed in DNA analysis that it is not genetically distinct from the common pronghorn, and therefore populations in Oregon, California, Idaho, and Nevada should be considered among the common pronghorn. However, because it was distinctly created, many people still believe that the Oregon pronghorn is a separate subspecies and therefore is recognized among the general public. The Mexican pronghorn has a more pale colorization, a reduced mane, and a thinner muzzle than the common. The Baja California pronghorn has facial markings that are darker and has shorter and rougher horns. This subspecies is native to the Baja California region in Mexico and shows a darker facial marking and shorter than those of the common pronghorn. This is a critically endangered subspecies with an estimated population size of only about 200 individuals. Lastly, the Sonoran pronghorn is a small subspecies and has a smaller skull than the other subspecies of pronghorn. But there is a little difference between this species and the Mexican pronghorn subspecies. This subspecies is native to the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern United States and northwestern Mexico. The pronghorn is the only surviving species of the Antilocapridae family, which was originally divided into two subfamilies, Antilocaprinae and Mericodontinae, which mean ruminant tooth, and the last one of this subfamily went extinct by the end of the Miocene era. Antilocaprinae evolved during the late Miocene, which was about 20 million years ago, and evolved into modern-day pronghorns. The main difference between ancestors, like the Mericodontinae subfamily, and the modern pronghorns we see today, is horn structure, and speed also evolved to help pronghorns survive among its predators today. Among living animals, they most resemble some of the smaller forest antelopes of Africa, although they are not closely related. They also resemble some of the smaller solitary members of the deer family, which suggests that they might have also been solitary animals. Their ability to run suggests that they were adapted to the grasslands, which were rapidly spreading throughout North America at the time they lived. The early pronghorns, like the Mericodontinae, have all paired branching horns located above their eyes, but some of their cornhores show a burr similar to that on deer antlers. But there is no evidence that the horns were ever shed. Instead, the horns were covered with skin, which dried up and shed annually. The burr marks the point of detachment of the cast-off skin, and some horns burrs shows many as 4 burrs. And here we can see in the top picture of the Mericodontinae skull that the burr is located here. However, we can see in the bottom image of a modern-day pronghorn skull that it does lack this burr. Some distinctive traits about pronghorn is that there is slight sexual dimorphism present, whereas males average about 10% larger than females. Males are approximately 42 to 59 kilograms, which is 93 to 130 pounds. Females are about 40 to 50 kilograms, which is about 88 to 110 pounds. Their upper body and outside of their legs are a light tan or reddish tan color, whereas their chest, belly, inner legs, cheeks, and lower jaw are white, and they also are known to have a distinctive white rump. They also have 2 broad white stripes across their throat, and there is sexual dichromatism present, whereas males have a broad black band from the eyes down to the snout, as well as a black neck patch, and they also have longer horns. They also have long black eyelashes to help protect their eyes from the sun. Lastly, they have forked or branched pronghorns with a forward-pointing prong. The pronghorn helps make it unique. They are a cross between horns and antlers with qualities of both. True antlers are made of bone and shed each year, whereas true horns are made of compressed keratin that grows from a bony core and are never shed. Pronghorns are similar to horns in that they have keratinous sheaths covering permanent bone cores. However, these sheaths are deciduous and can be shed like antlers. The only extant animal with pronghorns is the pronghorn antelope, which is Antilocapra americana. Pronghorns are opportunistic herbivores, browsing and grazing on plant matter for about 40 to 60% of the daytime, where they search at dawn and at dusk. They have a protein-rich diet, like succulents, which are also known as cacti, rabbit brush, bluegrass, bunchgrass, ricegrass, sagebrush, squirreltail, and bitterbrush. A unique trait is that they eat the leaves, stem, fruits, and flowers, otherwise known as every part of the plant. And they also have a 4-chambered stomach that helps them to digest cellulose. A fun fact is that it has been calculated that one cow requires the same amount of food as 38 pronghorns do. Pronghorns switch from season to season to optimize the benefits of the food available. More browsing is done during fall compared to summer. During winter, pronghorns consume huge quantities of dried stems, stickleaf, Mexican tea, and other plants, and in the springtime, more grasses are consumed. Pronghorns are known for their high speed, as we talked about, and the speed and exceptional eyesight that they have help pronghorns to protect themselves against tough predators. And the main predators of pronghorns are known as cougars, wild dogs, bobcats, golden eagles, mountain lions, coyotes, and dire wolves. In this slide, we can see the cranial skeletal structure of the pronghorn. Here we can see that there are no incisors in their skull. They also have tall, crowned teeth. Their eye is completely behind their teeth, and their horns shed each year. And remember, they have pronghorns and not true horns or true antlers. As far as the reproduction and behavior goes for pronghorn, they are polygamous, whereas females choose mates by sampling, enticing, or silencing. By sampling behavior, the female visits multiple males and stays with each one for a couple of days. For mating in the week of her estrus, which is also known as her fertility period, the female usually returns to the chosen male it had visited before. When using the enticing behavior, the female pronghorn runs away from the males, and thereby she stimulates chasing and competitive fights among the males. Usually the female mates with the winner afterward. When the so-called silence behavior is used, the female retires to an isolated place a month before her estrus. The area is typically occupied by a single male pronghorn, and the female stays with the male and mates. Males attract females during estrus with a high-pitched whine, and the female raises her tail and waves her head from side to side to indicate that she is ready. The territorial male protects the female during her estrus and chases away other bachelor males. The birthing season is based on the environmental conditions and habitats. The northern populations breed around mid to late September to October, and southern populations breed around September to October, although breeding has been observed during July too. Similarly, the birthing season from the northern populations is between May and June, and for southern populations the birthing period is around June to July. Gestation is of about 245 to 255 days long, and fawns are weaned till about 4 to 5 months after birth. What is unique about pronghorns is they practice the hider strategy, which is the mother's ability to minimize information she transmits about her young's hiding place while remaining close enough to distract or drive away a predator. Known to recent research, they have found that the mothers remained away from their fawns long enough to cause the expected rate of energy gain for a coyote hiding and watching for the mother's return to the fawn to fall well below the rate expected for searching or ground squirrel hunting. The sexual maturity of females is hit around 16 to 17 months old, whereas males hit sexual maturity at about 1 year long. A common misconception about pronghorns is that the ornamentation of male pronghorns, contrary to popular belief, does not influence a female's choice for a mate.
Alright, it's Kaylee, and I'm going to take over and talk about the next family in Infraorder Pecora, which is Giraffidae. And I guess to start with a little bit of their evolutionary history, the earliest Giraffidae fossils that have been found were presumed to be from the Miocene, which was between 18 and 6 million years ago. And there's a lot of evidence for various different giraffid species found in Eurasia and Africa. But the earliest fossils were found in Kenya, Libya, and even as far away as Pakistan. So all species in this family are extinct except for giraffes, which I'm sure we all know about, and okapis, and their scientific name is Okapia johnstoni. And they'll have their own slide, but they're like a much lesser known African animal, but I think they're really cool and unique. As far as giraffes go, as of the most recent evidence, there are 4 recognized species of giraffe: the northern giraffe, the southern giraffe, the Maasai giraffe, and the reticulated giraffe. And out of those 4 species, there are also 9 subspecies. I did not list out all their names because that would take way too long. But the giraffe subspecies are recognized as subspecies because they have different coat patterns, and they're also found living in different parts of Africa. And on one of my next slides, I will talk about a map that shows where the different subspecies are found. So those are giraffes, and then there's just one species of okapis. They're a little bit of an oddball, but they're their own thing, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Okay, now on to the key characteristics of Giraffidae and what makes them unique in this family grouping. So the first one, I guess, is still kind of debated, but a large body size, or at least a large limb to body size ratio. So at least for giraffes, we know they are very, very big animals. I believe they can get up to about 18 feet, and the females maybe like 14 feet. But the smallest in this family is the okapi. They only get to be about 5 feet tall, but they also have a similar limb-to-body ratio of giraffes. The second characteristic is long metacarpal and metatarsal bones compared to the other pecorians. And this is what aids in propulsion that these animals use. I'll get into it again a little bit later, but these long bones assist in the style of movement that they use called gait, and it really helps them to elongate their stride and propel a great distance in just one step. The third thing is ossicones, which are the bony structures on the top of the giraffe's head, and okapis have them too, but they are much less prominent. I will show a better photo of the ossicones on the next slide, but all pecorians, not just Giraffidae, have some sort of horny structure on their heads, and that's one of the key characteristics of the entire Infraorder. So all the families have them too. And the fourth thing for Giraffidae is the bilobed lower canine teeth, which I'll show on the next slide as well. But these teeth are there to assist them with chewing and breaking down their food. Both of these species in this family are ruminants, so part of them breaking down their food is having the teeth to chew and break down the plant matter, and both of these animals also chew cud, like I believe all ruminants do, but I'm not 100% sure. But on the next slide, I will break down and show you the ossicones and the teeth in a little bit more detail. So this is a photo of a giraffe skeleton. Unfortunately, I could not use the one from the Field Museum because they don't want that out there, but I found another one. So as you can see, the ossicones are actually attached to the skull, and they are a bony structure. They're not like horns that grow on top like a lot of deer and some of those other ungulates have. So Male giraffes actually use these to spar with each other, whether that's over territory and mating. And the giraffe expert that we interviewed for our project, Rebecca, told us that some male giraffes actually will develop more ossicone-like structures on their faces, which can help them be identified from females, and it also helps protect their skull and facial structure from sparring with other male giraffes. I couldn't find a really good, close-up photo of this, but I thought that was super interesting. I'm not sure if it's just the dominant giraffes that have that, or in captivity versus the wild, but the more you know. And okapis do also have ossicones. I'll show a photo of them on the next slide. They're just much smaller and less pronounced than the giraffes, because okapis are solitary animals, so they don't really fight or spar over territory as much. Another really interesting thing about ossicones that we learned from Rebecca is they somehow play a role in temperature regulation for giraffes. I believe that this is still ongoing research because I couldn't find too much about it, but I just thought that was super interesting, so they may serve another evolutionary purpose, I guess, within this family. And also with this photo, you can get a really good look at the giraffe's teeth. So they have mostly all molars, I believe, which they use to chew their cud as ruminants do. And the frontal part of the skull and the mouth is what leaves room for their prehensile tongue, which they use to grab plant matter and pull it into their mouths. So more on that in a bit. Alright, so the first species highlight in the family Giraffidae is kind of the odd one out, but it's the okapi, scientific name Okapia johnstoni, and they are the only living extant relatives of giraffes and one of two species, I guess, in this entire family. One misconception about okapis is that they are closely related to zebras somehow, but they are not. Their unique stripe pattern on their backside that you can see there is just an adaptation to help them blend into their environment, which they are rainforest dwellers. And as you can kind of see in this photo, they have ossicones just like giraffes. They're a lot smaller, but you can see them there in front of their ears. And also, just like giraffes, okapis have a prehensile tongue that they use to pull leaves and plant matter into their mouths when they eat. And they also have been observed using their tongues for grooming. Not sure if giraffes do this, but okapis do at least. So these guys are only found in the rainforests of Central Africa, most specifically the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They don't live anywhere else outside of this region. And for that reason, they are some of the most elusive and secretive mammals on Earth. The native people of the Ituri rainforest region where they're found hardly ever see them and barely speak about them, and they were not observed by Western scientists until 1900. So we really still don't know tons and tons about okapis, and they're really hard to observe in the wild. Most of what we know comes from okapis in captivity. So some fun facts about them is they have really, really amazing hearing. Their ears, as you can see in the photo, actually can rotate fully around, so they can listen into their surroundings, and this is one of their main defense mechanisms against predators, and also probably what alerts them to humans or anybody nearby, making it really, really hard to even find these guys. Their main predator that they have to worry about in the rainforests are leopards, so the hearing is one adaptation that allows them to steer clear of them. Just like giraffes and most other ungulates, they are ruminants and eat a variety of different leaf species, and they chew cud and do all those other things that giraffes and a lot of other ungulates do. Okapis are mostly solitary animals unless the mother has a calf with her. They haven't been observed to live in herds or anything like that. Adult okapis can get up to 5 feet tall, and like I said earlier, large body size was one of the characteristics of being in Giraffidae, but these guys aren't as tall of giraffes because they live in a completely different environment. They live in the rainforest, whereas giraffes are savanna dwellers, so if okapis were really tall in the rainforests, that wouldn't work out too good because they have a bunch of tree branches and other obstacles that they need to steer clear of, so that is likely why they evolved to be a lot smaller. Unfortunately, okapis are on the ICUN's red list, and they are considered to be very highly endangered, mainly because of habitat encroachment by humans and illegal hunting. Also, the fact that they are only found in one place on Earth, so if anything happened to their habitat, that would not be good for them as a species. And another issue with conservation of okapis is just the lack of awareness about them as a species. Like I said, they're so elusive that even the native people of that region have barely seen them, and a lot of people, especially in Africa, have never seen them. So that is why having a small captive population has been very beneficial for introducing them to people. And also, zoos do play a big role in conservation of a lot of different species, so that can work in the okapi's favor as well. The good news for their conservation is, as of 1992, 1/5 of their habitat in the Ituri rainforest was made into a wildlife reserve, so at least 1/5 of their prime habitat has been protected and set aside for them, as well as other wildlife. So the most interesting thing that I read about okapis that will also come up again when I talk about giraffes is these guys seem to have their own secret language of a variety of different very low sounds that humans cannot hear without assistance from a computer. So scientists have recorded some okapi vocalizations over the years that had to be analyzed in an audio lab so that we could hear them. But the main theory from those scientists is that the mother okapis are using these calls to check in with her calf when she has to kind of park him somewhere and go get food. And the reason it's great that they can make these really low sounds is they can't be heard by predators. So the leopards or anything else that predates on them would not be able to hear these sounds, and therefore they wouldn't know that there's a vulnerable baby just being hidden out there somewhere. So on the next couple slides, I'm going to be moving on to giraffes. Okay, moving on to the second and final species highlight within this family are everybody's favorite, the giraffes. And I believe their overarching scientific name is Giraffa camelopardalis. I have seen it listed where each of the subspecies has Giraffa and then blank for their scientific name, but I believe this one is kind of like the overarching, and it also applies to the northern giraffe species. So on the next slide, I will show photos that show the 4 main species of giraffe, and then on the following slide, I will get into the subspecies and show a map of their home ranges, and we can kind of see like where they're found and where they branched off from the 4 main species of giraffe. Okay, so here are photos of the 4 main species of giraffe. I guess as of 2018, they decided that these are the 4 species, and then the rest of the subspecies all branched off of one of these 4. So there's the northern giraffe, the reticulated giraffe, the Maasai, and the southern giraffe. And I believe the most common species of giraffe that we would be familiar with is the reticulated giraffe. They are one of the more common species found in zoos and in captivity. and the Maasai giraffe is another common one that we may see in captivity. On the next slide, I will show the different home ranges of these giraffes and kind of where the different subspecies are found. This map came from one of the papers that I read. So the one on my left shows the historical range of all of the giraffe species and the 9 subspecies, and on my right is the current range. And as we can see, unfortunately, all of these ranges of where the species are found has shrunk considerably in the past 50 years. But giraffes are pretty widespread all across the African continent, with a lot of them on the more eastern coast. But each one of these different colors represents a different subspecies and where they're found. I did not have time to delve into all 9 individually, but I believe the main difference between the species and the subspecies mainly is where they're found. And with these subspecies, one of the main speculations of what led them to evolve is separation in the various populations, because as you can see in the historical range, a lot of these ranges used to overlap, and now there's a lot of gaps and fragmentation going on in their current range. So that is one, I believe, the one of many, or the main speculation of the justification for the different subspecies of giraffes. Moving into the diet and behavior for giraffes. Unlike the okapi, giraffes are savanna dwellers. They live out on the open in the plains, and their long necks are actually an adaptation that allows them to reach all of the leaves and foliage up high, so they don't have to compete with any other herbivores, really, who eat all the food down low. So the giraffe's food of choice would be acacia leaves. I hope I said that correctly. Those are the trees that are very commonly found on African savannas, and I believe those are what is in the background of the second photo. But these leaves are also what provides them with a majority of the water that these animals need, because water can be scarce out in the savanna, and a giraffe having to bend down and drink water at a watering hole is when they are most vulnerable to predators. So it's not something that they really want to have to do that often. If they can just get it from their food, that's a win-win for them. Giraffes are extremely large animals, and like most ruminants, they have to continuously be eating in order to acquire enough energy from their food to keep them going. So you will almost always see a giraffe just constantly eating, whether that's in the wild or in captivity. And if they're not eating, they're going to be chewing their cud and digesting their food, which takes up a majority of their energy. As you can see in the top photo, the prehensile tongue that I mentioned earlier that both giraffes and okapis have, this allows them to easily grab leaves and pick around them onto tree branches so they can avoid things like thorns and spines. They can actually grab very precisely with their tongues. And another adaptation that giraffes have is they have very sticky saliva that helps them avoid any sharp objects from damaging their throat that they may accidentally swallow. And their saliva is also loaded with enzymes that help kind of start the process of breaking down their food before it goes down into the stomach. As far as behavior goes, in the wild, giraffes are herd animals, and according to Rebecca, a herd of giraffes usually contains one male and a group of many females. And the advantage of this is mainly just safety in numbers and watching out for predators. Giraffes are usually too big for predators to take down on their own, but calves especially and older giraffes that are sick or injured are at the highest risk, so most herds contain females with young. Other than that, I believe their behavior allows for some fission-fusion. I couldn't find confirmation of that, but I believe the herds can break up depending on the amount of resources that are available, because each individual giraffe needs to eat about 75 pounds of leaves a day to sustain itself. So it would make sense if they needed to size their herds based on the food that they have available. And typically their behavior also allows for sociality in that respect, but it's not always required. In giraffes specifically, males are the dispersers, so females will care for their calves until they are about a year old, and then I believe between the ages of 1 and 3 is when the males will go off and find a new herd of females, because 3 is when they reach sexual maturity, and some females, I believe, remain in their natal groups, but they may come and go again, just depending on resources and practicing some fission-fusion. So the dominant male in the group is mainly there just to protect the females and to breed and pass on his genes. There really is no paternal investment that has been observed in giraffes. It's mainly just the mother. And from birth, the young are pretty self-sufficient. I believe both giraffes and okapis can stand within 30 minutes of being born, and by the time the calves are a year old, they're pretty much on their own. So besides safety in numbers, the giraffe's main defense mechanism is their speed. They can run in very fast bursts of 35 miles per hour if they need to get away from something. Giraffes also have been observed doing some kind of karate kick defense mechanism too with their long legs, but again, I'm not 100% sure if that's more just in captivity or to defend themselves against predators. The main thing they're going to do is run if something comes after the herd. So, like I mentioned earlier, most species within Pecora practice a type of movement called gait, and it's where the front and the back legs on one side move forward together, and this body design allows them to move very quickly and have a very long stride length, which is part of why giraffes can run so fast. So it's really hard actually to find a photo of a giraffe running that isn't blurry, so that one on the bottom is one of the better ones I could find of them doing that, but they are quite fast when they need to be. And like I said earlier with the okapis and their vocalizations, some similar observations have been made with giraffes as well. At first they were believed to not vocalize at all, except for the occasional snort or grunt to alert from predators, but Rebecca, our giraffe expert, confirmed that giraffe vocalizations are still not well understood, and a lot of the noises that they make are below the range of human hearing, so a lot of research is still being done kind of analyzing those vocal sounds. But one of the theories out there that we talked about is they use these sounds below the range of human hearing and most other animal hearing for long-distance communication between herds. So this is something that could be somewhat similar to what the African savanna elephants can do. Probably not at the same scale, as this is still being researched, but I thought that was fascinating that two different species in the same type of environment may be able to use sound or vocalizations and things like that to communicate in a very unique way across a long distance. Moving on to giraffe conservation. As a whole, giraffes are only considered vulnerable to extinction, not necessarily critically endangered, but some of the species and subspecies are definitely more threatened than others. But populations as a whole in recent years have been slowly decreasing in the wild, mainly due to habitat loss. One of the subspecies, known as the Nigerian giraffe, is labeled as extremely threatened, And the Rothschild giraffe, one of the main 4 species, is listed as near threatened. But the Rothschild giraffe has almost been eliminated entirely from its former habitat range, and now lives in just a few tiny isolated patches of Kenya and Uganda. Looking back at the map I showed, the Rothschild was that teeny tiny little circle that they drew the arrow pointing to, so they almost have no habitat left for just that subspecies. And habitat loss is becoming a huge issue because, like I said on the last slide, each giraffe needs up to 75 pounds of food in a day to sustain itself, so a lot of patches of quality habitat are becoming fewer and far between. And this is partially due to human encroachment on their land, using it for livestock grazing and human expansion and urbanization. And also climate change is playing a huge part with all the extreme droughts. Like, the food that they need is growing in fewer and fewer patches. Besides human and climate threats, poaching is another threat to giraffes. A lot of local peoples will hunt giraffes for their meat and their bone marrow, and the hair on their tails can also be quite valuable. And the other main threat, like I mentioned, is just livestock grazing and human expansion, ruining the quality of their habitat. So the future of giraffes in the wild, quite frankly, just revolves around having quality habitat available to them. But the good news is there is a substantial population of giraffes in captivity all over the world, and they have helped us understand a lot more about them as a species, and by helping to contribute to research and conservation efforts. People have really grown to love giraffes from seeing them in zoos, and the only other thing I could think of was like the Toys R Us logo is a big reason that a lot of us know giraffes. So they are in mind by a lot of people of species that we would want to protect. So there are some pretty considerable efforts out there for protecting giraffes. According to Rebecca, our giraffe expert who works with them in captivity, we have learned tons about giraffes' overall health and well-being in captivity that could help assess the health of wild giraffes. She in particular mentioned that understanding how we need to care for giraffes' hooves and their joints in captivity can help translate to observing wild populations and making sure that they are healthy. Rebecca thinks the best thing we can do with protecting giraffes in the wild is, again, focusing on habitat conservation and ensuring that there's adequate resources for them. And the other big thing that she mentioned is having these more isolated populations of subspecies and fewer numbers of individuals could become a huge problem in the future if the numbers were to get low enough in order to have inbreeding. So she also thought it was really important to keep that in mind. And a lot of the focus on giraffe research in captivity is around genetics. And she said Lincoln Park Zoo is part of one of the many zoos in the US and abroad that participates in a breeding program, and they have the genetics on file of all the individual giraffes in captivity and who can breed with who. And they try to keep the captive population as healthy as possible if there were ever a need to breed them for releasing or rehabilitating them back into the wild. So she said keeping an eye on habitats and population genetics was going to be critical for sustaining giraffes in the wild as we face climate change and obviously human development that threatens lots of other species besides them. Another thing she said could be beneficial is doing more research about human and giraffe conflict in the wild. Giraffes are not really necessarily known for going after crops or being in people's way, but like I said, with like human expansion and the livestock grazing, there is the potential for that to come up. And even still, Rebecca said it could be good to do some research or analysis on specifically how giraffes in each of these populations are being affected by changes in their surroundings. And that could be really helpful for helping to increase population numbers in the wild. Alright, on to the next family in Pecora. We're not going to be touching on it very deeply because we already went way overboard on some of our featured species, but this is Bovidae, and they are the cloven-hoofed ruminants, and this includes the cattle, bison, buffalo, antelopes, and caprines. This is one of the largest groups of Pecora, if not the largest, I believe, and there are 10 extant families within this lineage, and that includes 24 species and 8 genera. And there are several now extinct ancestors within this lineage as well. And it's a very, very widespread grouping. You can find Bovidae in Africa, North America, Eurasia, India, and Southern Asia, so almost all over the world. And these species within this family are pretty well known because a lot of them have been domesticated by humans starting around 10,000 years ago. So primarily your goats and your sheep are the ones that have been domesticated and still are today.
The family Moschidae includes the musk deer, a single genus living in highland forests of Asia. A 2003 phylogenetic study by Alexander Hassanen and colleagues based on mitochondrial nuclear analyses revealed that Moschidae and Bovidae form a sister clade to Cervidae, where previously, until the beginning of the 21st century, the family Moschidae was understood to be a sister of Cervidae. Morphological features uniting musk deer include small size, absence of horns, large upper canines in males, single lacrimal foramen, much longer hind limbs compared to the forelimbs, and the retention of the saltatory locomotion. The extant musk deer has now decreased in numbers and is included on the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. Declining populations of musk deer in Russia may be the result of increased poaching near logging areas and roads, but there are ways to mitigate the threat, including encouraging logging companies to set aside high conservation value forests to retain intact forests, and to close logging roads post-harvest to reduce access by poachers. There's a thriving black market for musk lands, used in the perfume industry and Eastern medicine,